Nice. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks so much, and thanks to Chuck and Melissa for setting all this up and arranging all your packs and getting them all out there. If we haven't met before, my name's Mitch. I'm the global brand ambassador of Tot Rum, and it's a pleasure to be back here with you guys. Who was at the last Minnesota Rum session that we did? Like almost 2 years ago now, I think. Yeah, a handful of you guys. Was it that long ago? I was trying to remember.
Yeah, about 2 years ago. That's when we did it last, was when we did the last consignment.
I've actually got the old box set here with all the rum, which weirdly I went to look for it because I was curious how it's different from this new box set. And then I discovered some bottles. I think that it was something that Chuck gave me, and then I totally forgot I had it. So I was like, oh, undiscovered rum that I didn't realize I had little drams of Hamden and Privateer. But then I've got the notice from the last one, and it says Wednesday, the 3rd of March, 2021.
There we go.
Wow, there we go. All right, nice. Well, welcome back, everyone. And yeah, for anyone who hasn't done a session with us before, really nice to have you here. I hope you enjoy it tonight. Let me just double check we've got the right packs, because otherwise I might have to switch the rums out I have. So I believe you've got the pack which finishes with Master Blenders Reserve 2021. Does that sound right? And then you should have one rum in there which says Guyana and Trinidad.
Yes.
Yeah. Then a Barbados and Jamaica. Then an Australia. Yeah.
That is correct. Yeah.
And one which is like 50th anniversary and last consignment together. Yeah. Perfect. So the order we're going to do is going to be that. So we're going to start with Guyana and Trinidad tonight. Then we're going to go to Barbados and Jamaica. Australia will be 3rd. Flagons will be 4th, or 50th anniversary and last consignment will be 4th. And then 2021 will be our final one tonight. So this is a really cool tasting session. It's one of the more ridiculous blend breakdowns that you're ever gonna see. I don't think anyone's done anything quite like this before. It's very complex in a way and very fun in another way. So if you haven't done like a blend breakdown with us before, or if you've ever picked up a bottle of rum that is a blend of different regions or different casks or different styles and I wonder what went into that, I wonder how much of each one or what that would have tasted like. This is essentially what that pack is all about. Master Blenders Reserve 2021 just landed in the States, I think about 2 months ago, because shipping and all of the world's fun of getting things on time at the moment. So we're sort of running a few months behind with our releases there, or our limited releases over in the States. It's slowly catching up. So the Master Blenders 2022, which came out in July over here, will be, I think, landing around February time for you guys over there. So it's we're slowly getting closer to the year it's meant to be in, and hopefully in time we'll get even more there. The reason why we do this, and the reason why I'm sort of keen to split this apart for people, is I always used to hate when I used to work on a bar or picked up a bottle of rum, especially if it was a blend or something like that. I hated picking one up and going, I wonder what's in this, and then asking the company or asking the brand ambassador or asking whoever it was, like, so what's in this rum? What's actually making this up? And they would say something like, oh, it's a secret recipe, or, oh, we can't tell you, I'm like, what do you think I'm going to do? Do you think I'm going to like find all these casks and reblend it myself? Like, I just want to know what the ingredients are. And they're like, ooh, mystery. And I always thought that was bullshit. And then when I joined Tot, one of the first things we were talking about, they were like, we want to talk about the fact it's a blend and how good all these parts are. And I'm like, well, why don't we just tell people what all the parts are? And like, let's put it on the label and let's make it super transparent. And we weren't actually sure if we could do it to a certain extent. Like there are rules in whiskey, say, where
Nick, what year was that?
This was I joined the company in 2020,
Okay.
3 months before the pandemic started, because I thought that would be a great year to travel the world and become a global brand ambassador.
You haven't left that room since then.
Yeah. One day I'm going to be actually on your time zone. It's going to be very exciting. But so yeah, we weren't actually sure if we'd be allowed to do it, because ski doesn't let you. If you companies like Compass Box tried years ago to put all of the blend percentages on the labels, and they got told off. There are a couple of whiskies which will put information like that on the website and give you a bit more information. Compass Box is a good example, but no one had ever put these blend percentages on the label. No one had actually like put it all out there. And the first one we did was with 50th anniversary. That was like our 2020 release, which I think was in the packs you would have done before, for anyone who joined us on our last session. And then this was 2021. So this was the back label that you'll find on this bottle. If you find one and you want to pick up a full one for yourselves, this was all the information on there. So you can see there's Trinidad, Barbados, Ghana, Australia, Jamaica. We contacted each of the distilleries as well and asked them, are you happy for us to put your name on the label as well? Because we didn't want it to be something we just put on there without permission. Luckily they all said yes, so that was nice. And then this was the first year of us starting what we called our perpetual reserve. And this is another small thing which you'll see shifts from 2020, from the 50th anniversary bottling to this year's release, was this term, perpetual reserve. Almost everyone, when I describe perpetual reserve, goes, oh, you mean Solera, right? Because I think we have this sort of predisposition in the rum world where as soon as a blend is slightly complex, we just call it a Solera, and everyone in Jerez and all the sherry people just cry because they're like, no, it's not really a Solera. And it wasn't really accurate. So this perpetual reserve idea sort of comes back to how the Navy used to blend, and we'll go into that more later on. But it's talking about taking last year's rum, in this case, the 50th anniversary. We put that into sherry barrels for 9 months. We then added all of these other casks you see on top of that. We then created an extra third of this rum, put that into sherry casks for the 2022 edition. And then we bottled everything else we had, which is about 6,000 bottles. So the idea is that each year we take some of last year's rum, put that into sherry casks, build upon it next year. So there's always some of last year's going and feeding into the next year's one. Obviously, the first rum to really start that was the Royal Navy blend, which is the last component on the end. That's the old flagons, or the last consignment. So we're kind of borrowing an old idea which doesn't really make sense to do in today's day and age, but we're doing it anyway because it's great. And hopefully you guys enjoy it as it builds up. So the blends are getting more complicated. I'll give you a quick preview of something that hasn't actually gone up online yet. For Master Blenders 22, which will be coming to you guys in February. 2021, you would have noticed we had about 9 components there. 2022, we had 20. And so we couldn't fit them all on. This is kind of what the 2022 back label looks like. And you'll notice we've kind of had to summarize it in Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados here to, because here's 5 components. Essentially, you scan the QR code and it takes you to the website to give you the full recipe. But it wasn't that clear. And I said to our designers, who are not the biggest fans of mine anymore. I was like, could we make a back label as if size and space was no object? Imagine you've got the biggest bottle in the world and we just put every single component on there. And they were like, fine. So this is what the back label would look like for Master Blenders 2022. And as I say, it has about 20 different casks in there. Each blend is its own kind of super blend of Guyana, Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad, and then the 2021. You'll see the 2021 obviously goes into 2022 as well. We've got Caroni in there, Trinidad Distillers, Long Pond, Clarendon, New Yarmouth, Foursquare, Mount Gay for the first time, and a load of Demerara distillers. It's kind of ridiculous, and I kind of love it for that. I realize this probably only appeals to a small group of people and a small niche group of people, and most of them are probably here on this Zoom call today. But I love that, it's like that's how, for me, that's how it should be. The further you go in your rum journey and the more questions you start asking, you should be able to get these kind of answers if you want them. If you don't care, that's fine. That's like, hopefully it just tastes good, but I just want to know. I'm just curious to see what's in these blends and what people are putting into it. So this is kind of the theme of tonight. We're breaking down that barrier. We're breaking down those walls, rather than just saying to you, look how great we are at blending. Look at the secret recipe. We want to actually show you some of those ingredients that went into it. I will say it was kind of my hope that we would have each individual country by itself. And the one limitation they gave me on this pack was that they only had 5 slots and we had about 7 potential rums that we could put into it. So we had to make a choice to blend some together. So we're going to start with Guyana and Trinidad, and pour yourself out some if you haven't already. And the reason why I put these two together was because Guyana and Trinidad for me has sort of become synonymous with, the classic Navy rum style. They were 2 of the biggest countries that provided rum for the Navy. And it's historically, yes, it's accurate that they were 2 of the biggest producers. It has kind of become canon over time because of other Navy rums out there and because of the choice of rums that they use, that they'll often sort of push this idea that, Navy rum was just Guyana or just Guyana and Trinidad. And that's the part where it's not really true. The Navy blend was really a world blend of rum from all over the place. So we can't get trapped in this thinking that just because that's what brands tend to use nowadays, that's how it always was. It wasn't. It was much more complicated than that. And I think it's much harder for brands to necessarily communicate the whole story of Navy rum, because it's a big story and it kind of changes the way we talk about rum blends and how rum was blended over the last 200 years. Navy rum affects a lot of the traditions that we kind of have out there. But yeah, we're going to start with the Guyana and Trinidad because it makes sense from that traditional point of view. And I'm going to show you a video which I can't remember if I would have shown you this before. Some of you may have seen it before, some of you may not, but we've got this old video from one of the old blending yards, and it actually shows you some of the rums that they were putting in and the percentages that they were doing at that time. Now, again, that would have changed over time. I'm just trying to find this, but looks like my computer's updated and changed. It's all changed how it's listed. 1 second. So this was a place called Royal William Yard, which was sort of near Portsmouth, Plymouth kind of area. And there they had one of the old Navy blending houses. Now, to give you an idea, the Navy had these blending houses in different parts around the world. So there wasn't just one blending house, there was multiple. And depending on where your rum was being bottled and blended would have changed completely what you actually got. So Royal William Yard was one of the big ones. There was another one here in Scotland. We think there was one in Singapore as well. We got one flagon bottled in Singapore. But this sort of gives you just a little insight to what these places would have looked like and where this rum would have been blended back in the day. So hopefully you can see this up here. It's quite a long video. You can sort of see a lot about Navy provisions, but we'll cut to the rum part here.
I feel like I need one of those barrels. I'm just saying.
Is there supposed to be sound with this, Mitch?
Oh, wow.
Now that's a rick house.
Nice.
Mitch, there's no sound with this. I don't know if you can hear us.
So you guys can't hear the sound?
No.
No,
Nothing.
we
There's
cannot.
been no sound the whole time.
Oh, okay, hold on. I apologize, guys. Let's see if we can fix that for you. 1 second. It's much more interesting with the sound.
Everybody's
flowing.
super light. We're a
It was
little,
very
we're a little.
beautiful imagery.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. Hold on 1 second. It could be, it's quite possibly because I've got my earpods in, because one of the complaints over lockdown of doing these virtual sessions at like 2, 3 a.m. in the middle of the night was my partner's like, can you not be shouting about rum at like 3, 4, 5 a.m. in the morning? And so I was like, oh, I'll use earpods today, but I think that may have screwed this up. So 1 second, let me come off here.
Might have to share the sound in the bottom right, someone was saying.
Right. Guys, let me know if this works now. Oh, no, that's not sounding for me either. 1 sec.
Reshare and hit share sound bottom right. Okay. Ah, we can't get
Yeah,
that.
you have to unshare and then reshare.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
And then, yeah,
I love that we're still learning how to use this after 2 years.
And when you hit share the second time, there should be a check mark box on the bottom right that says share sound.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna say hi. Boom.
Second.
And see.
Right, let's see if this works now.
Oh,
Okay, you can see it okay?
definitely see it, and it's fascinating.
And now we've got come on. No, I can't hear it either, which is great. I'm with you guys. It's much more boring without the sound.
Still fascinating.
Isn't technology wonderful?
Right?
At least we have rum to drink.
The
It's
best.
true. You know what? That's true. Toast to the process. So,
Yeah, just drink more. This gets a lot better when we start drinking. So
They even made that.
Especially this Guyana at 54.5%. It's a great way to
Repair and remake empty.
can you guys hear this now?
yeah,
Yes.
now we can.
Yeah,
Nice.
Okay.
heard something.
So
Yep.
if everyone just throws on mute for a second, just give me a thumbs up if you can hear it, okay?
I did say 74,000 gallons of rum earlier on, but that's not all. At the William Yard, they even make their own rum casks. This highly skilled work is still done by hand. With loving care, the coopers repair and remake empty casks returned by the Navy. When they're finished and polished, on goes a brass plate with a traditional "The Queen, God Bless Her" engraved on it. As for the hooch itself, it's blended at Rangerton. Navy issue rum, or Nelson's blood, is blended to a recipe almost as old as the Navy itself. Mr. Charlton explained it all to me.
When we get it to about 40 over proof, our job is to put it into the vat and bring it down to 4.5 under proof, the strength we issue to the fleet.
How does that compare with the rum I would buy in a shop?
Well, the rum you buy in the shop, we've got 33 1/3 under proof. When we get the rum, we have at the moment 4 varieties: Demerara, Trinidad, Barbados, and Australian. The Navy have their own particular blend, which is 60% Demerara, 30% Trinidad, and 10% the Barbados, or 5% of Barbados or Australian. We put quantity into the vat. We know by experience now it's about 1,200 gallons to make our mix of 1,900 gallons when we add the water. We put into the end of the vat, then we turn on the agitator. You can see behind me. Give it a good turnover for 3 or 4 hours. Then we take the strength of the mixture at the top of the vat and the bottom of the vat. When those strengths agree, we know then the strength of our own mixture. We then add the appropriate amount of water required, which we get from a formula that we want so many gallons of water to bring that rum down to the strength of 4.5 degrees under. We put the water in, put the agitator on again, give it another good turn up for 3 or 4 hours. Then we once again, we take a series of strength tests from top of the mixture and bottom of the mixture. And when we find that they're both 4.5, we can't always get 4.5 exactly, but 4.3, 4.6, then we know the mixture is ready for issue to the fleet.
And then you cask it.
And then we cask it, as you can see, under the cask under the taps. The one we either put in the Curaticans for big ships, which is 18-gallon cask, smaller ship, 10-gallon cask, or for submarines or a small boat, we put it into 1-gallon jars.
All right, so there's a few little things to unpack there. So one, he's talking about the different regions and the different styles they're putting in. So he talks about Barbados, Guyana, Trinidad, and Australian. He gives you some idea of some of the blend ratios that they were using at that time. Now that would have changed over time depending on availability, but obviously that's what they were using at that point. Notice there's no gunpowder tests. They've got hydrometers. Unfortunately, no one's lighting rum on fire. So another little myth dispelled. And one of the things you'll notice he points out at the end is about, you know, what kind of containers they put the rum in. So whether it's going into barrels, 1-gallon jars, which are these flagons for smaller ships, all these kind of things. And obviously for anyone who knows Last Consignment, the flagons are kind of where our journey with Black Tot kind of began. So it's a nice little insight into history. One of the things you'll be hearing as well in that video was he talks about bringing it 4.5 degrees under proof, and the one in the shops is 30 degrees under proof, and when they get it, it's slightly over proof. Now, proof for our purposes, coming from England, would be 57.15% ABV. Okay, that's proof. Anything above that ABV is over proof. Anything below is under proof. And if you ever look at these old rum or whiskey bottlings from, you know, the 60s, 70s, or any time before that, you'll notice they never used to use ABV. They used to have a number with like a degrees symbol next to it, and that degrees symbol was how many percent of proof it was, whether it was over that proof or under that proof. You know, so 70 degrees on that sign would be saying it's 70% of proof, which is like 70% of 57.15% ABV. It's just a really complicated way of saying it's 40% ABV, basically, right? And because it was the old days and we made numbers really complicated, and yeah, that's how they talked about things, you know, and then decimalization came in and made everything much easier. But it's slightly different. I bring it up because it's slightly different to the American system of proof, where, you know, 50% ABV is 100 proof. And so that can kind of get confusing. But yeah, we're talking about same word for two very different schools of thought and two numbers here altogether. So yeah, so I hope that all makes sense in itself. But what do we think about the rum? How are we enjoying this first one that we're tasting today?
Super smooth.
This
Definitely
one
wakes up your palate.
Mhm.
yeah,
Mitch,
this one,
just a quick question. I mean, typically, like, like Guyanese and Trinidadian rum would be, like, to me, diametrically sort of two different stratospheres. So how did you decide on putting those two together in terms of, I know you had to condense it, but why those two together, if you follow me on that, versus, like, let's say, for example, Australian and Trinidad, and then have the Guyana like separate?
I think for me, it was a couple of reasons. So one, as I say, from like a more historical point of view, if you like, more people are used to having Guyana and Trinidad together as a traditional Navy rum style. Certainly in more modern bottlings of Navy rum, those are the two that most people focus on. The other aspect of it was I figured most people, and particularly over in the States, I think most people won't have tried Australian rum by itself before. And like out of all of the countries we were using, for me, Australia was the outlier and probably the one which fewest people would be familiar with. So I thought it'd be interesting to try that one by itself. Whereas, you know, there are Barbados and Jamaica blends out there, there are Guyanese and Trinidad blends out there. And so I thought, you know, yeah, it's that's more familiar probably for most people. Whereas, yeah, Australia, I don't know, has anyone who's had Australian rum before? Probably more of you guys than most groups. Yeah, and usually Beanley, right?
Well, we got the transcontinentals that have come into town. So we've gotten the ability to drink actually quite a few different, well, the same distillery, but quite a few different Australian rums from them.
Yeah, nice. No, it's Beanley and specifically Steve McGarry, when he was at Beanley, did a great job of making Australian rum accessible and getting independent bottlers to support it. We'll talk more about Australian rum, but it's odd that more Australian rum hasn't hit the scene. But yeah, a lot of that is purely down to Steve just making sure it got out there. So again, just coming back to what is in this blend and what you're actually drinking here. So if you imagine all of the Trinidad and Guyana on this list sort of coming together, so you've got 3 Trinidad components, so an 11-year, a 10-year, and a 24-year. You've got the Guyanese component, which is 17-year. Again, we've given you the split of tropical and continental aging as well, so you can see where they grew up. And if you're wondering, yes, we've blended these in the same ratio as what you see on this blending list is what we've blended in the component for you here as well. So the same, we did go that geeky with it. So you're getting a fairly good representation of exactly how those components got used in this blend.
Nice.
What is it doing? What is it bringing to the blend? The Trinidad rum's an interesting one because I think Trinidad, sometimes we associate Trinidad rum with being very light, quite neutral, quite delicate in some instances of Trinidad rum. Then there are examples of Trinidad rum which are super flavorful, full of stone fruits, going to as extreme as your examples like Coroni and others, which are, you know, certainly no one would say is light and delicate most of the time. So Trinidad rum has this huge array of flavors, but I think a lot of the more commercial ones available maybe don't showcase so much of that. But it's certainly out there, and there's certainly some really great Trinidad rums to explore. Guyanese rum you're much more familiar with, obviously. You know, your Eldorados, your various single cask bottlings that you're going to get from there. And I always think Guyana brings this beautiful chocolate kind of coffee note to rums that is really important for us to have in this blend as well. Now, there is another tie-in here and another sort of historical thing which I think is worth sort of noting. And when we look at the history of Navy rum and these two countries specifically, they're very, very, very tied in together. And if you look at sort of the rise and fall of rum and distilleries in those places, a lot of it is tied in with Navy rum history. So if we rewind a little bit and we go back to the start, so the Navy in its very early days was it was whatever rum you could get, you drank. And in fact, it didn't even have to be rum, right? It was if you got beer, if you got brandy. We loved brandy, we just hated the French, right? So it was like, you know, if we could get brandy, we drank it. You know, gin maybe for the higher grade officers, things like that. But in the very early days of the Navy, we were British. We weren't really making that much whiskey in the 1500s, early 1600s. It wasn't on the scene. But beer was what we drank, right? Beer was our national, if you like, still is to a certain extent. So we would put beer in the barrels and then we would travel with that. That would be what we would drink at sea. Water wasn't that safe. You wouldn't put water in barrels, or if you did, it would last a few days and then it would go green and slimy and not be drinkable. Also, it wasn't like you turned on a tap in the 1500s and got nice, clean drinking water, right? You got cholera and all sorts of horrible stuff. So we figured fairly early on something about, we didn't know why necessarily, but something about drinking the booze made you live longer than drinking the water, right? Okay. This whole 8 glasses of water a day would have been like a death sentence. So, but 8 glasses of beer sounds good to stay hydrated, right? So we drank beer. Different countries would drink different things in their navies depending on what they produced. So, you know, the Portuguese could have port, the Spanish could have sherry and wine, the Dutch could have Geneva, the French could have everything because they were the French. Champagne, cognac, Armagnac, wine. So they had pretty much the best back bar in the fleet, which is probably why they lost all those battles, you know. And so we all had our different spirits, different drinks that we took. And then when we went to the Caribbean, the question became, what do we drink on the way back, right? Okay, because as all these European powers started colonizing and started going around the Americas and the Caribbean islands, we weren't making any of those things over there, you know, not at first, and a lot of it we weren't able to, you know, it was a different climate. Obviously the English were slightly late to the party. The Dutch and the Portuguese had a slight head start, and then, you know, we didn't want anyone putting flags in more places than we did, so we quickly chased after them. And then by the time the English got to places like Barbados and we discovered sugarcane, we didn't know they'd planted sugarcane there like 50 years before, right? So the sugarcane wasn't native to the Caribbean. We just thought it was because when we arrived, that's what we found. And we cut down this sugarcane and we try it and we taste it, because that's what you did 400 years ago. If you didn't know what something was, you cut it down and you tasted it. And if it didn't kill you, you tried to sell it for lots and lots of money, right? This was kind of the British mentality to sugar and spices and all these things. We thought it was incredible. We built a whole empire off these things, sugar and spice and all these kinds of stuff. And it began this sort of new export, this new this new era, a very dark era in humankind, but built off the back of slavery, built on the back of colonialization. But it also changed what we were drinking and what we were able to get access to. And so rum very quickly became synonymous with the sea, with sailors, with having to go to this faraway exotic place to go and get this spirit and bring it back. So for all of the bullshit marketing we have now of sailors and pirates and sea monsters and all of this crap you see on rum bottles, it did have a genuine origin back in the day, right? It did have some legitimacy of how this all began. And the Navy at first were drinking whatever they could, like the first Navy code in 1731 lists out what everyone's allowed to drink. And it says in there, you're able to have half a pint of overproof spirits or 8 pints of beer, right? So that was your options, depending on what was available. Half a pint of overproof spirits, imagine half bottle of Ray and Nephew, thank you, or 8 pints of beer. Either way, it was a wild time to be at sea, right? Everyone's getting wasted, throwing each other overboard, and they quickly halve it again. And then you get 1740. This new Admiral Edward Vernon comes on, who wears this grogram coat, which is this waterproof mohair and silk coat glued together. And in 1740, a waterproof coat is new technology. It's quite exciting. For thousands of years, we just got wet. And then this guy comes along and is like, I am dry. And they're like, wow, what's your coat called? He's like, a grogram coat. So all the sailors call him Old Grog. And then when he becomes the admiral, he goes, let's water down the rum. And they go, oh, fucking grog, right? And so grog becomes this slang term for the watered down rum that the sailors are drinking. So that dates from 1740. Now, early 1800s is where it starts to get more interesting for our purposes. After years and years and years of everyone just going port to port, grabbing what you can, plundering what you can, stealing what you can, buying what you can, you get to this point where industrialization is starting to kick in and more efficient production methods are starting to kick in. And all of the merchants, which in some case read slave owners and read colonists and all these places, but all of these merchants got together at one point and were like, this is not a very efficient way of buying and trading rum and all the goods that we're getting from the Caribbean. Because what would happen when they brought it back to England, you've all seen the River Thames or heard the River Thames flows through London. You'd have all these ships coming up the River Thames to drop off their goods in the port. And how they used to do it was you had your port, you had your ship came in, your ship got unloaded, your ship would carry on and go back out, and then the next ship would come in. And you'd have all these ships in a queue. So you might have 10 ships in a queue, you might have 50 ships in a queue. You might be sat in this queue waiting to offload your ship for at times up to 8 weeks, 10 weeks, like just sitting waiting to unload. Now, during that 10 weeks, you're like, well, I'm not going to pay the whole crew, so I'll get rid of everyone I can, just run a skeleton crew, right? And then for some reason, over the course of those 10 weeks, your very expensive cargo would slowly start to go missing because people would either be drinking it or selling it over the side or getting rid of it. And so what they did around the early 1800s, all these merchants got together and said, we'll build a dockyard, a proper industrial dockyard, where instead of one ship unloading each time, we can unload 12 ships at a time. And they'll all come into port. We'll build this place where 12 ships can come in. We'll hire the crews to offload the ships, and they'll do it super quick. We'll pay for the security because it was in their interests for these ships to be secure and not get robbed, right? And they created something called the West India Docks. Okay, and then later the East India Docks. And so these old buildings, these were a revolution at the time of like how to unload cargo quicker. And around that time, the Navy built its own dockyard just south of the river in a place called Deptford. And they did a similar thing. They were like, okay, let's build a massive warehouse where our Navy ships can come in and they can get all of their uniforms, all of their meat, all of their rum, all of their ammo, all of their weapons, whatever it is, all in one place. And so that video I showed you just before, that would be an example of a Navy victualling house, right? It would be a giant warehouse where a ship could get all of its provisions that it needed for a trip. Now, around this time, they also said maybe picking up random barrels in random ports isn't the best way of stocking our ships with booze. Maybe we should create our own rum blend. And so they built these giant blending vats. They built, it was about 51 of them that they had at first in Deptford. And they connected these vats with a pipe a third of the way up so that you could top up the rum in any vat and eventually it would all blend together, right? It was this crazy, huge blend of rum that they were creating. As I say, all the vats were open top, so they evaporated. So your angel share, even in London, was about 10% from these vats. Huge amounts of angel share that you're losing every year. By connecting them all up, they all blended together. And at their peak, the Navy was using for the whole fleet, it was about 18 million liters of rum per year. Okay, which is a lot of rum. Okay, so 18 million liters. Now, at the time, there wasn't one distillery that could supply them with 18 million liters of rum per year. And so they had to, in order to create this blend, in order to have enough rum for everyone, they had to start buying from multiple countries and multiple distilleries. And so, not really for flavor purposes, purely for logistic purposes, they started blending multiple countries together, all in this blend, and inadvertently created the world's first world rum blend, right? And yes, if they could buy from British colonies, British distilleries, they would. So your Barbados, Trinidad, Guyana, Jamaica made sense to buy from your own turf. But if they didn't have enough rum, because again, it was all tied to how much sugar they made that year, how much molasses they made that year, what their production was, they would buy from Martinique, from Cuba, from Australia, from Africa, from all over the place. So the Navy rum blend was really a melting pot of everything. And why this is important is it completely changed the way rum was blended forever after. You know, when we talk about now and I go, this is a blend of Barbados, Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad, Australia, you go, sure, sounds good. It's rum. Why wouldn't it be? You know, if I said this, if this was a whiskey tasting and I went, hey, so we've blended some Scotch with a bit of bourbon, with a bit of Canadian rye, with a bit of Japanese, like whiskey people would lose their tops, right? They'd be like, how dare you? Like, this is whiskey. We're, you know, I don't know. You know, they don't necessarily talk like that, but some would, you know. And in whiskey, we've had a couple of examples of it. You've had like world whiskey blends that have come out. And you're like, again, so what's in it? And they're like, we can't really say. And you're like, this is bullshit. Because if they put Scotch and Irish and bourbon and all these things on the label, every single country would sue them because it's against their whiskey rules to say this stuff. So rum, we have this freedom to blend every single country together. And I'd always thought, because I was a bartender before doing this, I used to work at a place like Trail of Happiness in London. And for me, I learned about tiki history and Trader Vic and Don the Beachcomber. And I was like, oh, they were the ones who first blended 3, 4, 5 different rums together to make their cocktails. Like that was where I thought rum blending kind of started. And then you find out the Navy story and you're like, oh, 130 years before Don even opened Beachcomber, the Navy were just blending rum just because they had to, just to have enough of it, right? So they set this precedent that doesn't exist in any other spirit category. And I know we kind of know this, but it's kind of worth repeating. You can't do that in whiskey. You wouldn't do that in gin, right? You wouldn't go, let's mix English gin with French gin and Spanish gin. It's like, no, you just choose your botanicals, you throw them in and that's it. You know, doesn't matter that most of those botanicals don't come from the country you're saying it's from. Who cares? You know, it's like, it's gin. You don't mix Polish vodka with French vodka with Russian vodka, or and be like, oh, I've mixed these 3 levels of flavorlessness together, isn't it multi-layered? No, you don't do it. It doesn't happen in these other spirits, but it does happen in rum. And it's a blessing and a curse, I think, in the rum world. I think it's a blessing because we can create awesome flavors. We can literally take pretty much any rum from around the world, throw it in a bottle. If you wanted a splash of cane juice rum in there, if you wanted some cane syrup rum, you wanted something from the Americas, you wanted something bright and grassy, we can do all that. We can do it because it's rum. And rum people are like, I'd be really interested to try that. Let me see what you've come up with. The curse of it is most of the time you go, it's a secret recipe. So you never have any idea what's going into it. And you lose this sense of provenance from all these different countries coming together, right? You lose the sense that there's Barbados in there, or that it's Trinidad in there, or why these flavors have come together. And for me, I think that if we're going to be rum blenders and we're going to be relevant in years to come, we should be highlighting and championing these regions rather than saying, oh, it's all us. It's like, no, if you use shitty ingredients, you're going to get a shitty product at the end. You need to use great ingredients, and then you have something good at the end. So that was a bit of a long-winded thing. I saw some hands go up and some questions, so let me jump on any of those now.
I had one question, if you don't mind me just asking. It's a historical question. If you don't know the answer, that's totally fine.
Right. This feels like a test, but that's okay.
No, I totally get it. You had mentioned that Barbados didn't naturally have sugarcane. And of course, like that's kind of a big deal with, let's say, for example, Puerto Rico and other places that don't have it. But I'm curious, and it sort of brought to mind something. I remember being on this island in Hawaii called Lanai, where they had these pines called Nelson pines that were, put up by Admiral Nelson, right? And they were set up so that when the British sailing fleet, naval fleet, was going around the world in different places, they could always find those pines and then, put a new mast on or whatever they needed to do. And I'm curious, for example, Australia, did Australia originally have sugarcane, or was that brought to Australia later on?
So it would have been brought to Australia as well, except it probably had less of a distance to travel. So it's generally thought now that all the sugarcane originated from Papua New Guinea, but also there's sort of some conjecture. We believe there was also some sugarcane in India and also some in China. There's a bit of dispute as to whether it all was sort of Papua New Guinea and then went to those places, or if it was popping up in a few different places and then got brought around. But yeah, generally, if you go back far enough, Papua New Guinea, India, and China are your kind of 3 main source origin points that people talk about. And then from there, it gets taken around the different trade routes, taken around the world. People were taking, so it was a real era of experimentation and working out what would grow where and what climates worked for different plants and different crops and things like that. And it just happened that sugarcane was one of these things that went nuts in the Caribbean and did very well. Why was Barbados so significant? Other than being, sort of the first place the British really colonized there. The Portuguese had been there before. That's where the name Barbados comes from, by the way. It's a Portuguese word for the bearded ones, which was not the fellas on the island with great beards. It was referring to the bearded fig trees, right? So Barbados was Portuguese for bearded fig trees, and when the English came along, we stole the name as well as everything else. But yeah, so my understanding is that sugarcane was brought to Australia, but yeah, from Papua New Guinea and then again in Queensland, Australia. If anyone's been there, you'll know it has lots of different climates just within that one country, and Queensland up top is very tropical, and so when you drive through Queensland, I mean, I've never seen as much sugarcane as driving through Queensland. It's one of the biggest sugar producers in the world. I think Australia is either top 3 or top 5 sugar producers in the world now as well, which obviously helps making a lot of rum as well out there. So
I'm growing sugarcane. I'm growing sugarcane right now.
You're growing sugarcane
in my indoor growing environment. So I'm actually growing it indoors under grow lights along with tomatoes. But it's very ironic that this conversation turned to sugarcane. I'm actually growing sugarcane right now indoors in Minnesota in the middle of winter.
Wild. See, there we go. So Minnesota rum coming your way.
I think so. I think so. I do a little brewing infusion. Yep.
I like it.
So Mitch, I had a question about the percentages that were talked about before. Were the percentages basically based off of how much they had of that product, or was it a flavor, or were they trying to get a different flavor profile, or was that just basically we have so much of this, we have more of this, so we need to use more of it in the blend, versus the Australian or Barbados component that they were saying that they were only using 5 to 10% of?
You're talking about the ones from the video?
Yeah.
So my understanding would have been a couple of things. Towards the end of the Navy blend, maybe like around 100 years in, we start to see blending for flavor start to happen. There's a note, there's a letter that gets sent to the Admiralty around the end of the 1800s, where they actually say, stop adding Jamaican rum because the sailors don't like it. It's too flavorful, it's too intense, too funky. The sailors weren't into it, you know. Nowadays, modern rum geeks would be like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, throw more Jamaica in there. But yeah, the sailors were like, no, didn't like it, didn't enjoy it. So we do start to see some choices being made around flavor, but for the most part, it would have been, I think a combination of supply, how much they could get a hold of, price, you know, because the Navy was still having to buy this rum, although they got a pretty good discount, I think, because they didn't have to pay tax and all these other great things by being a government provision, so they could buy it a little bit cheaper. But it, you know, nowadays we look at rum as a very commercial product in a certain way. It's like, okay, there might be some limitations on finding great casks or old rum especially, but no one's thinking, oh, you know, I hope Bacardi can make enough rum this year, I hope they've got access to enough molasses. It's like, no, I'm pretty sure they can make as much rum as they want, right? There's no shortage there anytime soon. But back then it was like, okay, how did the cane go this year? You know, Angela's growing her sugar cane inside. Like, how's that? How much cane did you get? How much rum can we make out of Angela's house this year? Oh, it was a bad year for the crops. Okay, not that much rum then, you know. Different things affected it over time. Was there a war going on? You know, were certain countries under siege? Was there trade embargoes? Was there different things going on? Did one of the other European powers attack an island and now they're not able to make as much? You know, all of these things would have had a very real knock-on effect on how much rum was produced. Now, Guyana and Trinidad at different eras became the biggest producers. So Trinidad wasn't really until the 1900s. If you look at the history of Trinidad rum, it comes much later. But Guyana very early on was making huge amounts of rum, okay? The thing that's kind of interesting to note about both of them is that in both instances, for Guyana and for Trinidad, the Royal Navy was their biggest customer, okay? So your biggest customer is buying literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of liters of rum off you every year. You've got contracts with them, selling tons of rum out to them. And then 31st of July, 1970, your biggest customer goes, I'm going teetotal. I'm not going to drink anymore. Stop buying all the rum. And then overnight, both countries lose their biggest customer. Now, it's not entirely down to this, but if you look at the history of Trinidad rum and the history of Guyanese rum, and you go, why did Guyana have all of these distilleries and then they consolidated all of these distilleries and now they only have one? Why did Trinidad have these 3 distilleries and then they consolidated all these distilleries and now they only have one? A big part of it was they lost their biggest customer, right? And when this happened, it had a knock-on effect. Now, there were other parts in it, Guyana especially over the years, industrialization, the declining price of sugar over the years, the increased price of labor over the years, because as they moved from, slavery to indentured labor to actually paying people, what a crazy idea. Your cost of labor goes up, your price of goods goes down, and also you've got machinery which can do what 10 distilleries used to do, now you can do in 1. So there were some other factors at play there as well. But, it was no big thing when the Navy decided to go dry. And certainly when we look at the history of places like the Caroni distillery, Caroni was a massive supplier to the Royal Navy. They used to use it in their advertising. They used to use it on some of the old Caroni bottles. Like if you see the old Caroni Navy rum and stuff, like Navy rum was a badge of honor at that stage. If it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. So when the Navy went dry, it was a big hit to some of these countries and some of these distilleries, and they needed some bailouts. And in Trinidad's case, you had the government coming in, and Tate and Lyle had some of it, and the government tried to buy 51% to save Caroni, and they sort of kept it alive for another 30 years after Black Tot Day, but then early 2000s it went, so it's the Navy is inextricably linked to some of these distilleries and some of these rum producing countries, and it's the reason why we do and don't have some of them today. So
interesting.
Let's drink some more rum. So we're going to go to Barbados and Jamaica next, and we put these 2 together. 1, because it's delicious. 2, because these are 2 of the countries which I think get talked about less when it comes to Navy rum styles, and yet weirdly are sort of almost at the forefront of everyone's mind on every rum forum and rum chat that goes on today. They're very much in the limelight, these 2 countries. So in here we've got some Foursquare, we've got some Hampton.
Oh yes.
And it works out roughly about 3 parts Barbados to 1 part Jamaica in this ratio here. So let me throw up.
That's delicious.
Again, so you can see.
Yes, it really is.
So the Barbados 5 and 5, 10-year all up, and then the Jamaica's a 9-year Hampton. The Hampton plays a big part in our Master Blenders story. So you may have heard, for anyone who did the session with me before, you may have heard about a slight mistake that we had with our 50th anniversary rum, which kind of inadvertently set this whole thing in motion. So when I joined Black Tot, I said I joined at the start of 2020. Some of you guys, or most of you guys, I'm sure, have probably met Matt Petrek or read some of his blogs online for Cocktail Wonk, and he's done some incredible research into Navy rum, and he's actually written a book on Navy rum which hasn't been published yet. But he the night before my interview with Black Tot, I was like, can you send me like your draft? And so he sends this draft copy of his book. I stay up all night reading this Navy rum book, and then go into the interview very well prepared with a load of stuff that no one had ever actually heard before, because it was just in Matt's mind and on this little draft copy. So Matt's done some fantastic research into Navy rum, which we've tried to bolster from our side as well. But when I went into this and when I got the job, one of the first questions I asked was, could we rebuild the Navy blending vats that they used to have back in the day, construct some giant wooden vats, evaporate all the rum off, put a pipe third way up? And our blender, Ollie, kind of looked at me with I want to say contempt. Like, it was just like, what the hell are you talking about? No, you can't have open top vats of rum in the middle of London, evaporating off 10% per year. Like, are you mental? The tax people will shut you down if no one else does. Also, it's a fire hazard. Like these vats back in the day, you can look up the old rum vats in London. They caught fire twice, and the first time it happened, all of the top of the vats were on fire, and it took the fire brigade a week to put it out because they didn't know how to filter out the fumes. So every time they sent someone in to try and put the fire out, they just got so drunk that they had to drag
I was about to say.
Sometimes people try the Old Navy rum, they're like, oh, it kind of smells kind of smoky. I'm like, yeah, it could be, like, so this kind of got shut down quite quickly. I was like, okay, fine. And then when we came to blend the 50th anniversary, it was April, March 2020. So just as the lockdown was kicking in, you couldn't travel, you couldn't visit the blending halls, you couldn't do all this stuff. And normally, if we were going to blend something like this and use some very rare rums, we would always just go to the blending hall and oversee it just in case, right? Because we're a small company, we're still independent, we're not, it's not like we've got our own blending and bottling halls. We use a third party, and we might be one of 50 things that they're blending that day. So to us, it's super special. To them, they're just like, yeah, cask 136 and cask 154 and cask throw it all in, So they did the blend. We couldn't travel there. We sent them all the percentages. We sent them the ratios and sent it out. And they sent this sample back, and we tried it. And we were like, it just smells of Jamaica. Like, and we tasted it. It was like, it just tastes of Jamaica. And we're like, just checking that Hampton that we asked you to put in, you did just put a third of the cask in, right? And they're like, oh, we thought you said 3. And it was like, of all of the components to completely send your blend sideways, putting in 3 casks of Hampton, the funkiest, craziest rum, when there's meant to be one third of a cask. And we're like, right. So then this mad scramble begins back of house over the next 3 months, because it's the 50th anniversary of Black Tot Day. It's the first time we've ever done this blend. It's kind of a big deal that we get it out by Black Tot Day. And so Ollie's trying to buy all these other casks, our blender, Oliver Chilton. And they've promised these casks to other people. And we're like, please, can we buy them? And they're like, no. And we're like, but pretty please. And they're like, okay, if they don't pay on time, you can have the casks. And luckily it's the rum world, so no one pays anything on time. So we get these extra casks, and we end up with a ton of extra rum for this blend to balance out the extra Hampton in the 50th anniversary. And we were making 5,000 bottles. We already had, all the front labels printed and all the bottles ready, and all, like, logistically it was all done. And we now had enough rum for like 7,000 bottles. And it was like, okay, so what do we do with this extra third of rum that we've got? And I get this call from Ollie one day being like, you wanted to do those perpetual blending vats and top it up every year and all this. And I was like, are we building the vats? He's like, no, we're not building the vats. But with this extra third of rum that we've got, we're going to put it into sherry casks. And then we'll leave that for the next few months. And then we'll use that as the base for 2021. And then we'll add all these new casks on top. And next year we'll make a third extra on purpose. We'll put that into casks. That will become the base of 2022. So essentially we'll rebuild this Navy blending style of topping up every year. We'll just do it in a bit more of a controlled fashion in casks rather than in open top vats. So we started filling up a load of sherry casks and getting all this stuff going on. And this was kind of the beginning of it. So yeah, Hampton plays a big part in our story as to why this blend exists and how it's all progressing. So, but who likes the Barbados and Jamaica? Who's digging that one?
Love it. It's delicious.
It's great.
It's hard to put Foursquare and Hampton together, not have it delicious, but it's a nice thing to have in the blend. So
Yeah.
Any questions on those ones, or shall we go to Australia?
I'm excited about Australia.
Yeah, let's move on to it. Let's jump on. So,
Yeah, this probably will be my first Australian rum. So
Mine too.
nice.
I'm excited.
Good. I'm glad. Well, yeah. Let's talk about Australia then. So, Australia is a fascinating one. As I say, very different climates in different parts of the country. It's crazy. It's, you know, I always think of America in the same way. It's crazy how vast it is. It's crazy how many different climates you have within that one country, and Australia very much so as well. The top right of the country, Queensland, is where all the sugarcane grows, and as I say, one of the top sugar producers in the world. It's not uncommon to grab a bag of sugar and you'll see, you know, product of Australia on there. So have a look for that. They make a tremendous amount of rum, and it's actually, so for Australia, their national spirit is rum. That's their national spirit. That's what they drink. However, most of it gets so much of it gets drunk locally that they never actually export the rum. And also a lot of their locally drunk rum isn't the greatest, shall we say, or isn't designed for maybe some of the rum connoisseurs in this rum. The most famous Australian rum is called Bundaberg. It has a polar bear on the front of the bottle. That's how you know it's good, right? It's now owned by Diageo, and I think for a little while they started trying to premiumize it, or started trying to take it out of the country a little bit, and then they kind of just gave up. The majority of Bundaberg, or Bundy as it's called locally, comes in this square bottle. They have Bundy UP as in underproof and Bundy OP for overproof. When they started to premiumize and do these small batch Bundys and things like that, all the loyal Bundy drinkers, and there is a cult of loyal Bundy drinkers in Australia, went, no, why are you premiumizing it? Why are you changing it? Like, we like it as it is. There's a lot of very odd rules about Australian rum. It's one of the few rum countries in the world that has a minimum age limit on their rum. So there's a 2-year minimum age limit on Australian rum. And this ties into a bigger question around, you know, we're talking a lot at the moment about GIs and local traditions and how to protect local rum things. But you always have to ask who's making the rules and why the rule exists in the first place. So in Australia, there's a 2-year minimum age limit for rum. However, there is nothing to say what size of container you need to spend those 2 years in. So as long as it's aged for 2 years in something, you're kind of fine. And so in Bundaberg, you have 10,000 litre wooden vats where their rum will age for 2 years, probably getting very, very minimal rum contact. In fact, no, I think it's even bigger. They've got their small ones are 10,000. I think their biggest ones go up to 60 or 70,000 litres, these vats. And as long as it's in there for 2 years, done. Minimum age limit ticked. And you go, why would you have this 2-year minimum age limit when it's probably not getting much wood contact? And then you realize Australia's history, as you know, they were, they had a lively backstory, the Australians, and there was a few renegades in there, and there was a lot of illegal distilling. There was a lot of sugarcane, so a lot of like moonshine or locally produced rum that people were making in their own stills. And they realized pretty early on, if they wanted to stamp out anyone else making a dent on the rum scene and trying to control it by putting in a 2-year minimum age limit, you could pretty much squash every tiny producer or local producer because they then couldn't call it rum. Now, is aging in a 70,000 litre vat for 2 years going to do anything? No. Is it going to stop other people from calling their rum rum because they can't make enough and they can't wait for 2 years? Maybe. So it's an interesting one. It also changes a lot with what you can drink in Australia, what you can bring into Australia. So presumably everyone here enjoys a bit of Ray and Nephew from time to time. Yeah. Ray and Nephew, delicious. In Australia, you cannot call Ray and Nephew rum. And so if you wanted Ray and Nephew in Australia, you had to smuggle it in from New Zealand or from somewhere else, because they either had to take rum off the label, which imagine saying that to a Jamaican, you have to take rum off the label of Ray and Nephew. What the hell are you talking about?
Good luck with that. Because
in Australia, it doesn't qualify as rum. Same with anything unaged, any unaged overproof or anything like that. You cannot have rum on the label. And so what some companies have had to do, and I think Ray and Nephew may have even done it now as well, is they have to do an Australian label that doesn't mention rum anywhere on the label, and you just call it a cane spirit or something else, and that's how you get around it.
That's wild. That's something I didn't even know.
It's very bizarre. There's a wonderful distillery there called Husk Rum, which their distiller comes from Martinique. They own their own sugarcane field there, and they harvest it every year and make this beautiful agricole style cane juice rum. And it's very tricky because they can't call it rum in Australia because it's unaged and it's agricole style. So they've called it an Australian agricole, because agricole, the terminology, the denomination, isn't protected in Australia, but it is in EU. So in Australia, they can call their unaged rum Australian agricole and get away with it because it's a loophole. But then when they come to Europe, they can't put agricole on the label because agricole is a protected term over here, but they can call it rum because the 2-year minimum age limit doesn't apply. So it's a really bizarre circumstance where it's like, and both sides are like, well, is it really agricole or is it really rum? And it's like, well, what do you want us to call it? Like we're stuck here.
I had a guy have me chased down at Bundaberg for like 8 years here in Minnesota. He had to have it. He was a Minnesotan. He lived in Australia for a while. So he moved to Australia. So now he gets all the Bundaberg he wants, and he sent me some. And I went, this is really the god awful stuff you wanted me to chase all over to find. And here in Minnesota, they ship in ginger beer, which isn't too bad, but they make a god awful root beer. Some of the worst stuff I've ever tasted in my life.
It's pretty wild out there. Australia is an interesting drinking culture. They actually banned any new distilleries opening up in Australia for about the best part of 100 years because one of the prime minister's wives was like, oh, whiskey turns men into pigs, and so they just banned any new distilleries or pot stills starting up for the best part of 100 years. And then I think it was in Tasmania, the Lark whiskey distillery started up, and they were the first to get a new license. But yeah, there was just this ban for 100 years. So if you already had a pre-existing distillery, you were fine, but no one new could open up. So it kind of just stunted Australia's growth for years. And now you've got Starward coming out over there. You've got Lark, you've got all of these amazing Australian distilleries. And yeah, and the reason why you're suddenly hearing about it now is because it was just on pause for so long. So unless you were established before, you were stuck.
I think the Bundaberg guy got himself in big trouble, didn't he, too? That's why he sold to Diageo during the America's Cup deal. He funded all the America's Cup to go get the cup back from the U.S. And then immediately after, like within 2 years, he was under arrest in Australia and lost all his money.
Oh, really? I didn't hear that story. Okay, I need to look into that. That's cool.
It's a Netflix special.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'll have a look for that.
Netflix.
So Australia and Australian rum history as well is quite fascinating. When you go back far enough. So when, as you probably know, English kind of used Australia as a dumping ground for some of our less savory characters. And yeah, so we used to take like convicts out there and we made it a penal colony. And it's like, yeah, do you want to stay in England or do you want like to stay on Bondi Beach? It's like, right, okay.
England.
Yeah, weird form of punishment. But when they first started it up, there was, it was the 1800s, very low sanitation, no real healthcare or anything like that. And they had essentially a group of militia who were responsible for looking after the colony and making sure that they defended it and all this kind of stuff. And very early on, there were some sympathizers who were like, maybe we should make sure they don't all die out there. And they were like, can you build a hospital out there? And the militia were like, that's going to be really expensive. And they were like, okay, well, what do you want to build this hospital? And they said, we want exclusive rum import rights for Australia. We want to control all the rum being imported into the country. And they were like, okay. And they did a deal on getting these rum import rights and stuff and giving it to the militia. And so if you ever go to Sydney, you'll see right in the city centre, there's a big hospital called nowadays Sydney Hospital. And outside there's a plaque that says, this used to be called the Rum Hospital. And it was, because they called it Rum Hospital because it was built off the back of rum. And rum was literally Australia's first currency on that island. So it's kind of crazy. It was really tied in. Beenleigh has a fascinating story. Beenleigh didn't start as Beenleigh. Beenleigh started as, supposedly, as legend has it, as something called the SS Walrus, which was a boat which went up and down the coast of Queensland, going from sugar plantation to sugar plantation, picking up cane, going on the boat, crushing the cane on the boat, distilling the juice or the molasses on the boat, and then going into the next port and selling off the rum next time they docked, picking up more cane, and then repeating. And they did this for, I think, the best part of 2 years before they got caught. Why did they do it? Because they didn't have a distilling license. But if they traveled into international waters, they could distill, come back in, sell their rum, hopefully not have to pay any taxes, and then repeat the same process again. So for 2 years, this boat just went up and down making rum.
Sounds like a good life in reality. It sounds like a great life in reality.
Yeah, it was eventually.
That's absolutely wild. Just the SS Walrus. Now I have something new that I have to go look up.
Yeah, well, you're going to see a lot more to do with it. Velier just announced that they're going to do their own boat with a still on it and recreate, I don't know, boat rum. I'm not sure.
Are they hiring?
Yeah, maybe.
I'll do that.
But yeah, so you're going to see this story, I think, come up more and more. But supposedly, when they finally caught up with the ship and they run the ship aground, the stills that they had on the ship, that still became the first still at the Beenleigh distillery. And so once they stopped the boat, they actually brought the still on land, created this distillery called Beenleigh. And Beenleigh has been running, I think, since the early 1800s. I think it's technically the longest running distillery in Australia. And what's that?
I was fascinated. I'm looking at images of the SS Walrus. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Small. It's small.
Oh, it's tiny. Yeah, tiny little thing, little steamboat going up and down making rum. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So Beenleigh Distillery started early 1800s. Pretty much them and Bundaberg were the two main distilleries everyone in Australia talked about. And then what happened a few years ago was this guy, Steve McGarry, who some of you may have seen online or on the rum forums, he joined Beenleigh. And he was like, it's crazy. We don't export any Australian rum. Like, no one knows Australian rum outside of Australia. And so he started contacting companies like Velier, companies like Main Rum and Shear and all these places, and being like, do you want to buy some of our older rum? and he pretty much single-handedly built the Australian rum brand on the global market. You know, everyone knew it inside, but globally no one had tried it before, and I think this stuff is absolutely delicious. So this is a 14-year Australian rum, I believe, 10 and 4, and yeah, just you'll see a lot from this kind of this era. They released a lot of, I think it was like their 2006 rum, and you'll see it by various independent bottlers, various casks that they bought out. But yeah, 10 years tropically aged in Australia, 4 years would be in Liverpool in this one. And I just think it's beautiful. It's fruity, it's funky, it's not quite as wild as a Jamaican rum, but it's still got lots of character. It's definitely full-bodied. What do you guys think?
It's a great rum.
Yeah, I liked it. Kind of like Jamaicans, almost a little fruity.
Super fruity. I almost get this, I don't know if it's just because I think of it as Australian, but almost this like slight eucalyptus kind of menthol note to it as well, which is in there, and it's just
definitely on the nose.
Something completely unique. It's got this kind of lovely like lemon citrus kind of note to it as well.
We got to get more Australian rum in the United States, and especially here in Minnesota.
It's cool, huh? Yeah, have a look for it, and it's going to get harder to find as well now. Steve McGarry's since left Beanley, and I believe the distillery's kind of like, they're like, yeah, maybe we should make more gin and some other stuff. So I think the amount of rum they're going to put out is going to drop a little bit, and certainly on export it's going to drop. So if you see Australian rum, grab it. You know, it's
investment bottles. Got it. All right.
Okay, got it.
It's very good. But this is, you know, this again ties back in and to why I think blends can be a good thing and a force for good, as well as the flavor and as well as everything else. But, you know, it's my hope that someone picks up a bottle like this, sees that distillery or sees that country on the label, and if they've never had it before, goes, maybe I should try some Australian rum. Maybe I should seek that out. You know, I think that's one of the cool parts that we can do as a blender. You know, for a lot of people buying this, sure, they're already going to be rum geeks like you guys and know all these places, but every now and then there might be something pop up on there and you go, I don't think I've tried that before. Let me go and investigate, you know, and I hope it works both ways in us being able to highlight some of these places as well. So yeah, Australia, if you haven't explored their rum scene before, definitely check it out. I say Beanley's amazing. Husk is amazing. If you ever see a bottle of Husk rum as well, maybe harder to get out in America certainly, but yeah, they do some really cool stuff. So
yeah, I'm looking at Macombo 20-year Husk, apparently.
20-year Husk.
I see a Husk. I typed in Husk rum, and a 20-year aged rum. Macombo, 750 milliliter Mexico. But you're actually talking about the brand name Husk, right?
Yeah, it's a Husk distillery in Australia.
I just saw the band.
Yeah, yeah.
Just saw the band. Now you got my attention, Strick.
Husk, it's another unique thing about Australian rum where Bundaberg pretty much owns the right to almost all of the molasses in Australia as well. So if you want to start up your own rum distillery in Australia, you have to buy your molasses from the biggest rum producer, Bundaberg. And someone was telling me, someone who did it, set up a distillery, and they said there was something in the contract, like if you get too big or if you ever want to sell your distillery or whatever, you have to give first right of refusal to Bundaberg as well. So it's this kind of crazy situation where you're like, okay, I'm buying molasses off the other rum producer, but if I get too big, there might be some issues. It's one of the reasons why Husk is really cool, because they've got their own sugarcane field. And so everything they do is just by themselves. They cut the cane every year, they crush it themselves, they ferment it, distill it, make it all there. It's quite funny. They've got these like 12 dunder cows that live on the plantations. So these like the biggest, beefiest cows you've ever seen, who just go around and they love the dunder. So every time they do a distillation, they take the dunder, because the dunder isn't alcoholic, but it's got some flavors, it's got some nutrients to it. The dunder, which is your leftover wash essentially from your distillation, they'll take it and they'll feed it to the cows, and the cows just go nuts for this stuff. So if you ever walk out onto the sugarcane plantation there, they'll be like eating their grass, like this is the cow eating the grass, they're eating the grass, and then as soon as you walk out, they're like, you got rum, you know, and they'll stalk you around these sugarcane plantations, like watching you, trying to see if you've got this dunder. And then I didn't know cows could run, but apparently cows can run. And if you cut across a certain part, they will like gallop towards you, and they're like, got rum. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, oh, I bet they're like the most delicious cows ever, like just rum infused cows. Like, how cool would that be? And the whole Husk family, they were like, yeah, we've thought about that, but the 3 daughters of the Husk family are all like hardcore vegetarian vegans, and they're like, no one's ever touching our cows. So we will never know. But yeah, really, really cool little distillery, really nice place.
That's awesome.
Let's move on to our 4th round. We've got our 50th anniversary and flagons, or last consignment. So this is the perpetual reserve part of that blend. This is taking the 50th anniversary, which has been aged in sherry casks for the last 9 months, adding it with a bit of last consignment, so the old Navy rum flagons, and putting that together. So yeah, it's good. If
You can definitely, it brings me right back to trying the last consignment. You can definitely taste it inside of that.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
it's a beautiful, beautiful.
That's good. That's good.
That was a special rum.
That's good.
I almost suggested that we all pitch in together and buy a bottle of that to include in this tasting.
Yeah, we've done it before. Actually, the first tasting we ever did as a club was we bought a bottle and split it. It's something that there is still a couple more. I've been keeping an eye on a few that are in the market. And it's one of those things that if enough interest comes to fact, we can definitely do that again, because I know Mitch is more than willing to, not to volunteer you, Mitch, but I know you're more than willing to talk about that rum and drink it with us. I know it's a big arm twist for you to drink some last consignment.
It's
So how do I add that shut up and take my money gif in here?
Yes.
It's one thing I will say with it. So when I started with Black Tot, I had it in my mind. I was like, when last consignment runs out, you know, that'll be my time done at the company. I'll finish up, I'll move on. And then they told me this year that we're probably going to run out in the next like 3-4 months. I was like, oh, okay, I probably don't want to quit just yet. So, we started with 3,000 bottles in 2010. We're down to about 300 now. So
that's wild.
Yeah, it's a weird one, because it is an expensive rum, and for the first 10 years it didn't really sell. It didn't really move anywhere other than a handful of rum nerds and a handful of old sailors and things like that. But I think for a combination of things, I think partly since we brought out like our Black Tot Finest Caribbean and these Master Blenders Reserves, so many more people have found out about Black Tot and the original bottling that we did, that it's, you know, the last 2 years we've sold more than we did in the whole 10 years before that, you know. So it's to the point where we've had to start allocating and stop some countries just buying it all, because Asia was just like, we'll buy all of it. And we're like, no, like you got to share. You know? And so we're trying to limit it. We're trying to make it last, but it will likely be gone in the next few months. Now, to put that in perspective, we still have some flagons. We do have some left, but we don't have the same ratio of flagons to create the same type of blend that we did before with last consignment, because depending on when your flagon was bottled or put together, it's, you know, has a different flavor, has a different, it's just not the same rum. So you've got to, we still have some flagons, we still might do something cool with it, but it won't be the same as last consignment. I don't know if anyone's seen the flagons. Some of you might not have, so let me show you a couple of things here, because if you haven't seen what last consignment is or where this all comes from, this is kind of a bit of the origin of Black Tot. So if you look on this picture, this obviously the old days, and on one of the ships drinking some rum. Now the guy who's third in from the left holding that wicker jar, that's a flagon of rum. The guy in the middle with the book, he's the purser or the pusser. So the pusser's rum that you get, that whole brand is built off the idea that the sailors called the rum the pusser's rum, because the pusser would be the one dishing it out and telling you, okay, you can get this much, you can get this much, blah, blah, blah. This was the daily rum ration. This was the grog being handed out. So that tub down there, you saw it in the video earlier, that's where they mixed the rum and the water together and they dished it out to the crew. This is a bit of a rowdy crew, to be honest. This is what they're meant to look like. This is like, this is you guys now on Zoom being very polite and very nice. This is us when we actually do this in real life and we get a few daiquiris going in us, right? This is, but yeah, this is what the grog ration would look like. And you'll see on the barrel or the grog tub, the king, God bless him. So this tells us it was before 1953, because after 1953, they would have changed it to the Queen, God bless her, on any new barrels going out. And obviously, if they were still doing the rum today, it would now be changed back to the King, God bless him, for future ones going forward. But this is what the last consignment started as. So these boxes, if you ever see a box like this, call me immediately. So this is a box that contains 2 flagons of Navy rum, and on these boxes are little clues about where that rum went to. So faded in red on the left, you see Antwerp. So we know this box was sent to Antwerp, which was a naval base that the Allies set up after World War II. We can see on the box on the left, PKD 11/55. So this box was packed in November 1955. We've got the address of where it was sent to, Royal Clarence Yard, one of the Navy victualling yards. And you can see how these boxes are like constructed, right? They're nailed shut. You've got to crowbar them open. They're filled with sawdust, no cardboard boxes back in the day. And this is what the flagons look like. So if I talk about flagons all day, this is what a flagon is. This is 1 imperial gallon, different to a US gallon. So an imperial gallon is 4.5 liters. I know you guys don't believe in liters over there, but that's what it is. They're covered in wicker to sort of protect them knocking against each other. And underneath that, you can see it's this like glazed ceramic jar underneath. And the bit on the right, the wax seal, this is for me the most important part, the most exciting part. If that wax seal is still intact, it tells you where on the outside and when on the inside it was bottled. So 12-70, that was bottled in December 1970, 5 months after Black Tot Day. Okay. And these flagons, you know, they don't all survive. This one on the left was upside down, all the rum had poured through. The one on the right just wasn't airtight, it was leaking. I did taste that rum. It was dusty. It didn't taste very good. You find these cool things in some of the boxes, like these ration cards for, you know, provisions being issued to a base for 10 men, 4 men, 24 hours. You know, you can see on the bottom, a box of biscuits feeds 100 men, a jar of rum feeds 80 men. And yeah, the gallon, 4.5 liters, how it works out. So yeah, just cool little bits of history. And essentially how our story started was a sailor had one of these flagons, brought it to my boss, a guy called Sukhinder Singh, who was the guy who started Whiskey Exchange, and went, "Do you want to buy this flagon of rum off me?" And Sukhinder went, "Sure," and bought it. And then that sailor told a friend of his who had 2 flagons, and he brought them in, was like, "Do you want to buy these?" It's like, "Okay." And then they told another friend who had 10 flagons. And at that point, Sukinder's like, where the hell are you getting all this rum from? What is it? And also he hadn't tried it. So he cracked open one of these flagons, tasted it, and was just blown away. He just couldn't believe that rum could taste like that. He'd never had one like it. And to give you an idea of Sukinder's kind of mentality, every day for the next couple of weeks at 11 a.m. when he used to come in, he would pour himself a dram of this rum and taste it every morning. And every day it just got better and better and better. And he's like, we've got to do something with it. So it started like a 2-year mission, I guess, to find all of these flagons from around the world. And so where do you start? Well, you start at the beginning. So he called the Ministry of Defense, as you do, in England, and went, what happened to all of your rum after Black Tot Day when you ended the tradition? And they said, we got rid of it back in 1994. He's like, okay, where did it go? And they're like, oh, some company bought it off us. So they sent him a fax of like this disposal of Navy rum letter that they had from 1994. And he looked up that company that had bought all this rum, randomly a company from where I came from in Essex. And I'll show you the fax actually that they sent him. So this was his first breadcrumb clue. So you can see Ministry of Defence, release note, Collier Fencing in Chelmsford in Essex. I don't know why a fence company was buying a load of rum, but they did. Disposal of rum. Thank goodness they didn't pour it down the drain. From the Royal.
Does it say the Thatchers on there?
that?
Yes, it does.
Does it say the what?
The Thatchers, like roof thatching.
Oh, yeah, they were Thatchers, became fencers.
Yeah, that's it. Again, still not sure why they bought all this rum, but yeah, this was the last sort of trace that the government had. So 17th of June 1994, 24 years after Black Tot Day, they finally cleared out all their warehouses, cleared out the space, and got rid of it. It took Sukhinder 2 years of tracing company to company to company, finding out where all the flagons went. Essentially, half ended up in the States, half ended up in France. He bought them all together and then went, what do we do with it? And that's when he bottled Black Tot Last Consignment. And yeah, so as I say, that was back in 2000.
Amazing.
It is.
And this year, 2023, will be the end of that bottling. That will be the last of it going out, I reckon. So yeah, if you want to do any more bottle splits, absolutely, but maybe hit up Melissa sooner rather than later. Greg, so I can see you've got your hand up. Did you have a question there?
Yeah, I was wondering if you knew the varieties of sherry in it. And I see all your apple crates behind you. I wanted to know if you had any English cidery recommendations.
No, not many. So I'm actually calling from Amsterdam, and this is my makeshift back bar that I've put together with some apple crates here. So unfortunately, not too many good cider recommendations from here. But in terms of sorry, in your first question, so the variety
of the sherry casks in the 50th anniversary.
It's a good question. We have experimented with a few different types. We're experimenting a lot with sherry casks at the moment, both with our whiskies, because we produce some whiskies as well. Our parent company, if you like, is called Elixir Distillers, and we make Portiscade whiskey, Elements of Islay whiskey, Single Malts of Scotland, and then Black Tot Rum. So we've sort of been looking at sherry cask a lot with some of our releases. And the main ones we're playing with are, we've got some Palo Cortado, we've got some PX and Pedro Jimenez, and we've got some Oloroso. And those are sort of the main three that we've been experimenting with. We then kind of, it's a good question. I'm not sure exactly which ones he chose for 2021. I need to double check that. If you're interested, just drop me. I'll double check. But yeah, normally what happens is we put some in all of them, and then at the end of the year, he'll taste them and go, okay, this tastes really good, or this we're going to leave. We've actually kept some of the 50th anniversary aside because there was a couple of casks that he was just like, these are just too delicious to blend in anything. We're going to maybe do something with this later on. So there are still some random casks of 50th anniversary and sherry still aging away, which is cool. We are also experimenting with some of our components and Finest Caribbean and seeing what sherry cask finishes with some of that as well. So yeah, watch this space. You might see a lot more sherry cask stuff coming through on the rum side over the next year or two. So yeah.
I've got a question on the proof.
Yeah.
So it looks like the final blend is a 54.5 or 109 proof. And that's also on the box that's listed for every single one of the blends that we have here. But I'd imagine that as you're blending it, they're all completely random proofs, different proofs that eventually end up at 109. Are they all actually 109? And this blend, did you have to do that for a specific reason?
Yeah, good question. So Navy strength was 109 proof or 54.5%. And that was just Navy strength. That's if you issued it to a ship, if you put the rum blend on a ship, you brought it down to 54.5. There's a lot of sort of misunderstanding around it because again, 54.5 I guess in American terms would technically be overproof. I don't know because it's over 100. I'm not sure at what point you consider it overproof in the States. But for the
over
UK,
100 usually.
Over 100?
Usually, yeah.
Yeah. So, but for imperial proof, which is 57.15%, 54.5 is technically slightly under proof, which kind of goes against this whole, when they talk about testing with gunpowder and all this kind of stuff. Some people say that 54.5 was still the level at which gunpowder would still ignite and all this kind of stuff. And if the rum was on the ship next to the gunpowder and the gunpowder got wet with the rum, it would still be okay. You're on a ship, you're surrounded by water, you've got a whole ocean. I don't think the rum was the biggest of their concerns. So it's a nice story. But remember, they had hydrometers for the last couple of 100 years, but for whatever reason, and we're not 100% sure why, but 54.5 was chosen as the standard issuing strength for all Navy rum. And so we've kind of kept that tradition going. So you're completely right. When we get the casks, they might be at 60%, 65%, 58, whatever it is. We blend it all together, we see where it comes out at, and then we bring it all down to 54.5. So for the purpose of this tasting, we made everything Navy strength so that the ABV wasn't a variable when you're tasting these components. You're just trying it sort of straight across the line there. So
straight drunken.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, good old Navy strength tasting. That's what everyone needs at 3 a.m. in the morning.
I was gonna say, for you, it certainly is all get out, and we thank you for staying up and drinking with us. I know on a Thursday or a Tuesday for you, drinking. Yeah, sure.
It's
Wednesday.
It's my favorite time to drink. But let's go on to our final rum. Let's go on to our Master Blenders 2021. And yeah, I hope you guys love this. It's very different to our 50th anniversary. Now, the goal, I guess one of the questions some people have is, do you have an idea in mind of what you're trying to create when you start this blend? Like, and I think it's kind of like how I imagine a painter might work or something. Like a painter probably has an idea of the picture they want to create or the painting they want to paint. And then they try to get the colors to match that or get that doing. Or if you were cooking something, you probably don't just grab random ingredients and start throwing them in the pan and hope something good comes out at the end. Like you probably have an idea of what that final flavor or that final dish is going to be at the start, and then you choose the appropriate ingredients from there. I think it's the same with a rum blend. You know, we know each country, each distillery has its own unique flavor notes, its own unique profiles. What we don't always know is how they're going to balance with each other or how they're going to interact with each other. But we have this overall picture, this overall idea of where we're trying to get to. And the sort of the premise for Master Blenders 21 was we wanted to create something fruity, something funky, something fresh, something brighter, something more citrusy. We wanted to move away from this heavier, molassesy, rich Demerara style of navy rum, and we wanted to move towards something bright, fresh, and funky. So what would navy rum taste like if it was a fruit bomb, you know, essentially? And for me, this is the first time I tried it, I was like, this is like a smashable navy rum, which is probably not the most technical description, but for me, this was it was so different to these very heavy styles of navy rum out there. You know,
it's very drinkable,
much more interesting
versus the heavy rums.
Yeah, this is my favorite one so far for sure.
And it screams rum cake. It screams fall. It screams winter. This is very warm and comforting.
It's cool, huh? Yeah. No, it's really interesting. We've now released the 2022 over here, and now we've got the sort of three. I've started to try side by side, and it's interesting because every country has their favorites, and I've found that palates change from country to country, and some people prefer the 50th, some people prefer 2021, some are on the 2022, and it's really personal preference at the end of the day. But a lot of people come back to this as their favorites because if you like that fruitier, funkier style, then this one really stands out against the other ones we've done as something unique. So
I'm a little surprised because a couple of them I felt like had some good heat to them, and then there was a little sweetness in one of them, but this is just hits it all. It's easy to drink. It's got enough heat to it, but it's not harsh or anything. It's amazing how it comes together.
It's fun, isn't it? This is why I think these kind of sessions are so important, and you know, we do the same with this as we do with our Finest Caribbean, from you know, the very sort of entry level to the top level like this. Blends are so complex, you know, there's so many layers going on, there's so many different flavors going on, and I want you to be able to taste those individual parts, because I think it then makes the final thing make so much more sense, you know. And when you train your palate to recognize, oh, this is what this part's doing, this is what this part's doing, it's like hearing the individual musicians in a band or an orchestra, and then you hear it all together and you're like, I know where that sound's coming from now. That's the violin, that's the drums, that's this, you know, you can pick it out easier because you've had this this split apart first. So I hope I hope it does it for you. Like for me, I always find like different parts of my palate will fire off when I'm trying these individual components, and then when you try the final blend, it's like the whole tongue is just like boom, it all happens simultaneously, you know. So
the only thing I had to compare it to is I got a bottle of Pussers of the old Navy rum up here. I pulled that down, and this is a much more enjoyable product.
it's different. It's yeah, it's a very interesting one. Passes have done an incredible job. Without them, there probably wouldn't be a Navy rum category today, right? Like they did a phenomenal job of pretty much single-handedly carrying the Navy rum category for the last 40 years. The one thing I find a shame is that when they originally started, I think what they were doing was very close to what we're doing now. They were doing very like cool multi-country blends and bringing different styles, and it really was based around this recipe, this idea that they got from the Royal Navy of like, this is what we used to blend, try and recreate this. And I think it was really, really cool. In recent years, they've now sort of gone to just 100% Guyana, which is fine. I love Guyanese rum, but it's so different to what they were producing back in the 1980s. And I'm like, yeah, for me, it's interesting. It's a shame that they've moved away from that style, because for me, I think that's the most important part about the Navy rum story, is that it was these multiple countries coming together. And yeah, it's definitely cool to try some single regions as we've done here as well. But yeah, for me, the Navy rum story is a story of bringing this world of rum together and trying all these different things in one bottle. And I hope they start to do more of it. In fact, they did do a bottling this year called their Deptford Reserve, which was a multi-country blend and was very similar, shall we say, in some ways, and in its naming to what we're doing with Master Blenders. And I said to the guys, I was like, this is delicious, it's great. I was like, what's your blend? What do you put in there? And they're like, oh, we can't say. I was like, damn it.
Then I would say bullshit.
Let's get rid of secret recipes. I'm like, it's good. I want to know what's in it.
I think what happened with Bussers is the hurricane hit them so bad with their big operations down in BVIs, and it really set them back big time.
Right.
And so they've been struggling ever since.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm curious to see, because I know all of their bottling now happens in Guyana. It's all done at Demerara Distillers, so it's all for the most part single origin now, other than their special releases. So, but yeah, no, they've, as I say, fantastic brand. They've done fantastic things for Navy rum as a category. But yeah, I hope in the most nicest of ways, I hope this does sort of challenge things and push things forward a little bit as well, and encourage them to start releasing some crazier stuff, because it's yeah, it's,
they seem kind of content with the their bottlings, the ceramic, and they're selling them to the armed forces and things. And so we couldn't even buy a bottle of Pussers in the BVIs. It was all the decanters or nothing.
Yeah, the old decanters are beautiful as well. So
yeah,
some nice stuff. So what do we think? Are we going to clear Melissa out of all of her bottles immediately? I think you should. I think it's good to...
I think yes.
It's important that we take care of Melissa over Christmas as well, and that you guys have delicious rum to drink. So
it's a real arm twist to be able to drink that rum.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it in market yet, or when does it get here?
Melissa will probably be the best person.
It is in market. It is in market. It is allocated, as of course all the most delicious things are. But I think there are some bottles that are sort of available or floating around. So let your favorite store know, certainly. And we, distribute with the wine company. And so we'll be able to try to sneak a bottle or two where they need to be. But yeah, there's some kind of floating around.
Great. Thank you.
How much did you get out that way, Melissa? Do you know?
That is an excellent question. I'm trying to think how much the Midwest as a whole got, and then how much Minnesota had. I think 5 cases, maybe. So
are they 6 packs or are they 12?
They're 6 packs.
Yeah. So just
So
about
pretty limited.
enough for one each. So
I feel nervous. I feel very, very
We'll definitely do some
overwhelmed.
hunting. And if anyone wants to, I can connect Melissa with you and you guys can talk about that, or we can talk to your local liquor stores. They'll definitely, if that's something that you want, our friends over at Zips, our friends down in South Lindale, as well as I know Troy out in Haskell's out in Minnetonka, definitely will work with you on getting those bottles for you if that's something that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
And I hope anyone who wants a bottle is able to get one, especially for Christmas. And then, as I say, we're hoping the next Master Blenders, the 2022, we believe that's going to land in the States around February next year. So keep an eye out there. And if you do have a liquor store that you know that can ask and request and bug Melissa about it, then you know. Hopefully they can make sure they get some allocation in early on. And you know, it's been really interesting for me sort of over the last couple of years, obviously sort of seeing how the brand grows, and it really is one of those things, like the more you guys ask your local stores or your local bars for this kind of rum, the more likely they are to stock it and bring it in, you know. And it's especially with these limited releases, you know, we try to make enough that everyone gets, you know, a fair shake of it. But you know, where there's more requests, it definitely ends up more rum heading that way, you know. So be vocal. I'm sure you will be, but it's yeah, if you like it, just keep asking, and hopefully more and more each year will come to your area and come to you guys. So yeah. But do you have any further questions that you would like to ask me, or shall we finish with a little toast?
I have a question.
I'll go for it.
I got a question going back to the blend. There is, when we started this, my big question was there's so much going into this blend, and I'm like, how can you come up with a final blend with this many parts to it? Like, I can understand 3 to 4 rums going into a blend and deciding what that final is going to taste like, what those components will add to it. How do you come up with this? I think it was about at least 5 countries, and then multiple rums from some of those countries. So how do you figure all that out and get to what you want as a final blend?
It's a great question. It's a bit of a dark art, blending, I think, in a certain way. You know, it's you try. The first part is just finding what your pool of casks is going to be, and every year you have different availability and different things you have access to. So we will, like for 2023, next year's one, we've already started. We've got all of the cask samples that we can. I think we've got about 15-20 different cask samples that we can potentially pull from. We taste each of those. We go, okay, this is amazing, this is exceptional, this is okay, this is kind of a bit sideways, but it might work in the context of a blend, because you know, sometimes I think the hardest thing about a blend, again, I always bring it back to cooking, but it's like, you might like spice, you might like a little bit of pepper, you might like a bit of chili, but you probably don't eat peppercorns by themselves or like chew on chilies by themselves unless you're like slightly mental. And yet, in the context of the sauce or in context of the whole dish, you know it's going to do that certain thing and bring a certain flavor, and you want that flavor in there, right? And sometimes you try a cask and it might be hot, it might be funky, it might be really high ester, it might be on its own very, very intense, but you go, in the context of a blend, I think it's going to bring the chili in the sauce or the spice or something else. So first thing is to taste everything, try each cask individually, make sure it tastes good, make sure it's okay. Sometimes you'll find something exceptional, you're like, I don't even want to blend this is just perfect as it is, I'm not going to touch it, we're just going to keep that aside for later.
Perfect.
And then other things you go, okay, right, yeah, in this case, we want to create something fruity. So where are all the rums with the fruit notes coming through? Okay, the Australia's got some strong fruit notes. The Jamaica has, these old Trinidad rums are super fruity. The Demerara is delicious, but it's more chocolatey, more molasses. That's going to give some more body, but we're not going to make it the big flavor in this rum. We're going to use a smaller part of it because it will help, but it won't take us in this fruit direction that we want to create. All of these different parts, it's tasting, it's feeling, it's getting a feel of what it's going to do together, and then you experiment, and then generally what happens is Ollie, our blender, will create something. He'll get it to where he's really, really happy. He'll take it to Sukhinder. Sukhinder, our boss, will taste it, and then he'll generally go make it better. And then Ollie just has to go and somehow make it better. And
Ollie's a genius. Ollie's a genius.
Yeah, Ollie's very annoyingly talented with these things. But, the first year with 50th anniversary, so we were never going to use flagons or last consignment in the blend. And on the 50th anniversary, Sukhinder tried it and he went, make it taste older. And Ollie's like, what? Like, how? He's like, just make it taste older. And Ollie was like, okay, well, I've got some flagons of rum from 1970 and I've got some 42-year-old Port Moran. How's that? And he's like, yeah, that's good. And that's how those ended up in the 50th anniversary. And then this year it was kind of a similar thing. He was like, yeah, it's good. Make it taste better. And so Ollie's like, I'll add some more flagons in. And he went, yeah, that's it. So these flagons have become like this. We've now added it in each of the 3 years so far, however long we've got it. Ollie's kind of made his signature piece. His like secret sauce is just throw in a couple of flagons of the old 1970s rum. It'll just make it taste better. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's it's a combination of many things, and feeling it out, tasting, and having this picture in your mind of where you want to go with the blend, I think is key.
Yeah, no, that captures it. I mean, blending's an art, and yeah, I'm glad there's independent bottlers that are willing to get all kinds of different rums and put them together, rather than just a distiller that does their own.
It's something unique, and it's my hope that we don't lose this art over the years, and it's my hope, like, I think it's fantastic what we're getting now from single distillery releases and so much more transparency in rum. And it's really changed in the 10 years I've been in the rum world. We're in a whole different place to where we were when I started, certainly. And my hope is now that with bottlings like this and what we're doing with the transparency and on the back labels, that we can sort of encourage everyone to be more transparent on blends as well as just these single distillery releases, so yeah, I hope we start to see it more. I've seen a couple of rum companies have started adding blend percentages and things like this, and to me that's really exciting. That's how we move the whole thing forward, and it's nice to be a part of that. So
it's a great change for the industry. It's one of those things that I'm really happy that you guys push the industry in that way.
Yeah,
it almost sounds to me, not coming from a blending side of things, but bartending, bar managing, creating menus and stuff. It's just a larger way of doing that. Like, I had a bar back ask me recently, how do you come up with all these ideas? And I'm like, it's hard to quantify. Like, I come at it from a few different ways, and I almost put it in the same way as writing a song or something like that, or painting a picture, being an art school kid as well. Like, sometimes I know what I want the end product to be, which is what you were talking about. So I totally knew where you were coming from when you were saying that, Mitch. And then sometimes I'm like, I want to do this drink, but I've got like about 10, I call it like branches. So I've got like 10 different ideas. So then I make it doing this branch. I'm like, yeah, it's not bad. And I'll do that one. I'm like, no. And then I'll do that one. I'm like, oh, that's good. And that. And then I'll go, okay, that branch is the best one. And I'll go along like that. And then I do some other things with it. And then it ends up this flowering outwards into like whatever the end product is on that particular drink, you know. And it almost sounds like, again, I haven't gone on that side of the industry, but it's just a larger scale thing of what Ollie, you were saying, does with the blending to some extent.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example, Ben. Like, it's, you know, you get a feel for anyone who makes drinks here, or I say cooking is a good example, but you start to build up over time a sense of what balances with what flavors are going to work well together, you know, and you find some tricks and some things which are like, this will always be good, and then I can build upon that. And that, I think the same is true when you're blending casks together. You get, you know, okay, if I get something Barbados, it's going to have this vanilla, coconut, pina colada kind of fruity deliciousness to it, most likely, you know. And you try it and you go, yeah, okay, it's gone a bit this way or a bit this way, but it gives you that certain identity, you know, that will blend with this, that will blend with this. And I think over time you just get better and better at it, you know. So it's yeah, it's a fun.
It's the same in the wine. It's the same in the wine industry when they blend their casks and when they blend their wines. You know, they go over a large number of barrels, and it's a palate. It's somebody like Ollie who has a palate and a taste for what it's going to take from what barrel to create that taste that we have set as our profile. And there's just very unique people in the wine business that can do that, and there's very unique people in the rum business.
Yeah,
it's the minutia of flavor profiles and taste. It really truly is. I agree with that. It is an art that very few really can pull in, that minutia of these very fine flavor profiles that really bring us joy at the end of the day. I mean, this isn't about intoxication. This is about the intoxication of aroma, flavor, that nice warmth that this particular distillation at the end of the day, this final product brings. It's kind of amazing. So good job, everybody. And it's a great comparison with the wine. You're absolutely right, sir.
Yeah, and the champagne industry has even takes it another level above wines, because they're blending so many things to come up with a champagne that they can bottle, and it's a whole different profile. It's amazing. And when you get those people that do it, it's a really small group, and they're really good at it, and they work at the best champagne houses. And same goes for the blenders of the really fine Cabernets. They have a niche, and when they go away and we lose them, hopefully they trained new.
Yeah.
So really, we got to get Ollie and you, Mitch, over here so that we can learn from you and be able to really pick your brains in person at some point.
I'm very keen for that. I'm trying to set up some US dates for next year and spend a lot more time over there. So definitely would love to come and see you guys in person, and yeah, go and take over a bar somewhere and drink some daiquiris.
Yeah, well, when's the 2022 blend tasting? So you got to come for that. Bring some bottles.
Right.
Yes.
Watch this space. We'll try and line something up for the first part of next year. So
yeah.
But,
sounds amazing. Well, Mitch, I know it's late for you. Thank you again for coming out. It's one of those things that we always appreciate, the education that you give this group. Every time I listen to you, it's one of those things that I always learn something brand new. And that's amazing for going through now 4 of these classes with you, that I've learned new things every time. So it's always great talking with you. Thank you again for staying up super late in Amsterdam and educating us and drinking with us.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Mitch.
My
thank you.
And thank you, Chuck, for sorting it all out and for getting everyone their packs. And thank you, Melissa, as well, for coordinating everything.
Yes, thank you, Melissa.
We should finish with a little toast. I know some of you will have done this before. Some of you may not have. I'll also put my email in the comments. If anyone ever wants to stay in touch, or you've got my socials here as well, please stay in touch. If you like the session, tell everyone about it. If you didn't, just don't mention it to anyone. But
and Mitch is in the club page. So if you ever want to talk to him, about anything, just tag him in any of the comments. He's very proactive about reacting to things.
Yeah, no, feel free. Drop me a message anytime you have questions. And what we're going to do now, we'll break all of the Zoom convention rules. In a second, I'm going to ask you to all unmute yourselves together, and we're going to try and do a little toast together, okay, to finish. So pour yourself something if you've got any rum left. Come get your videos on if you're not in your pajamas yet. Come join us. And so this is a 400-year-old toast that was taught to me by the guy who taught me about rum when I used to work at Trailer Happiness back in the days. And I always think it's good to share over a couple of drams. So I'll say the first line, you repeat after me, and you have to do the arm movements too as well. Okay, it's very important. So right, so get yourself off mute. Let's see if we can coordinate this. Zoom rules. Right. Okay, ready? So there are tall ships.
There are tall ships.
And right, okay, hold on. Let's start. I know that you're probably at home, and there's probably someone at home who's going to be like, "What the fuck are they doing now?" Let's do this properly. All right, ready? So there are tall ships.
There are tall ships.
And there are small ships.
And there are small ships.
And there are ships that sail the sea.
There are ships that sail the sea.
But the best ships are friendships.
Our friendship.
Friendships. Here's to you and me.
Here's to you and me.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you so much, Mitch.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch.
Mitch, Melissa, again, thank you very much. Hey. Everybody, thank you for participating. I look forward to doing this with you guys again. Just a quick note for if you haven't signed up for the plantation tasting for next week, please do, because the drawing will end tomorrow. Right now, it's about a 50-50 chance about getting a kit. So sign up if you have the free time. It should be another fun one.
Yeah, awesome.
Is
that with Adrienne? Who's with that, Chuck?
That is with what's her name? Sorry, Adrian. I've been trying to keep
Adrian,
thank you.
Adrian, yeah. Adrian's awesome. So I used to work with Maison Ferrand for 3 years before Black Top, and Adrian's one of the best rum educators out there. She's absolutely awesome. So if you get a chance to see her, she's awesome and just one of the loveliest people in the rum industry. So yeah, you guys will have a great session.
Hey Mitch, quick question.
Yes, Ben.
It's not rum related. Okay. It's about England.
Okay, yeah.
Where maybe I forgot this, but where in Essex are you from?
A very classy part of Essex called Southend-on-Sea.
Same here.
Yeah.
Same here. Maybe I forgot that.
I was born in Westcliff on Meteor Road.
Wait, we have had this chat because I said that my granddad lived on Meteor Road.
No
so
way.
I remember us having a chat about this in a chat once. So we have spoken about this because we said probably I walked right past your house when I in the late 80s and 90s, because when I moved back to England as a kid, I lived on Meteor Road and a road just off of that. And then we moved out to Hadley.
Do you remember what number Meteor Road?
It was like 40 something.
Because I was 44.
I just remember
we were right next to each other and never knew it.
You know the house that was falling down when you're going that way, as if you're going down to the station, and there's the house that had like big beams up against just a few years back before I moved over here. That's on the corner. Well, it was on that end of Meteor Road. So
okay, I'll have to send you a picture when I'm there next. You can point it out.
Yeah.
Amazing, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you have a lovely evening. Take care.
Go get some sleep.
Yeah, thank you. Got to go.
Thanks so much, Mitch.
See you guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.